All right, welcome everyone. Today, we're going to dive into what I consider one of the most fundamental, most powerful principles in all of business and economics. We're talking about the optimization equation. Now, I know that sounds a little intimidating, but trust me, this isn't just a formula to memorize for an exam. It is a completely different way of thinking that, once you really get it, will fundamentally change how you approach every single business decision you will ever have to make. So let's start with a really simple question. How do you know when to stop? Really think about that. If you're running a company, how many software engineers do you need to hire? Is it 10? Is it 12? How many units of your product should you actually manufacture this month? How much money, down to the dollar, should you pump into that new marketing campaign? Every single one of these questions, from the corner store to the multinational corporation, boils down to this one crucial problem. How do you know when you've done just enough and when one more step is actually going to be one step too far? And here's the big idea for today. Every business decision is, at its heart, an optimization problem. You're always trying to find that perfect balance, that sweet spot where you are maximizing your profit, your value, your outcome, without overextending your resources. You see, if you do too little, you're leaving money on the table, guaranteed. But if you do too much, you start to see your returns diminish, and you can actually start losing money. So our entire goal, what we're going to learn how to do today, is to find the very peak of that mountain. So, how do we solve this puzzle? Well, the answer lies in an incredibly powerful way of thinking called marginal analysis. This concept is the key. It's the tool that lets us make truly optimal choices. And what it does is it shifts our focus away from looking at broad, often misleading averages, and instead it forces us to look at the impact of the very next step, the very next decision. This is the kind of thinking that separates the good managers from the truly great ones. Okay, let's really break this down because this distinction is absolutely critical. Average thinking, well, it's like driving while looking only in your rearview mirror. It might tell you that on average, your 10 employees cost the company about $50,000 each per year. Now, is that useful information? Sure, for accounting, but it is completely useless for making a decision about the future. It doesn't help you decide whether or not to hire an 11th person. Marginal thinking, on the other hand, is your forward-looking GPS. It forces you to ask the only question that matters for the next decision. What is the specific additional cost of bringing on this one more person? And what is the specific additional benefit that one person is going to bring in? So let's dissect the two sides of our optimization equation. First up, we have marginal revenue, which we'll just call MR. Think of this as the benefit side of the coin. It's not your total revenue for the month. It's not your average revenue per customer. No. It is the precise additional income you gain from selling just one more unit or serving one more client. It's the answer to the question, if we do this one more time, what's the extra cash we're going to see in the register? And on the other side of the scale, you've got marginal cost, or MC. This is the cost side of that same decision. It's the extra expense you take on to produce that one single additional unit. Think of it as the cost of the one more. Now, this includes variable costs, like the raw materials for one more widget or the hourly wage you pay for one more hour of labor. But, and this is a really crucial point for you all to grasp, it often excludes fixed costs. Things like your factory's rent or your corporate salaries. Those costs stay the same whether you produce 100 units or 101 units. So they are not part of the marginal cost of that next unit. And this all brings us to the golden rule, the absolute bedrock of optimization. A rational business maximizes its profit at the precise point where the marginal revenue of its last action equals its marginal cost. Think about that. As long as the extra benefit, the MR, is bigger than the extra cost, the MC, you keep going. Why wouldn't you? You're making a profit on each additional step. But the moment that extra cost of one more step becomes bigger than the extra benefit, you have to stop. That means the sweet spot, the absolute peak of the profit mountain, is right where those two things meet. MR equals MC. Now, theory is one thing, but let's make this tangible. Let's see how this actually works in the real world. We're going to put on our manager hats and step into a little coffee shop called the Daily Grind. Your job is simple. Figure out the absolute perfect number of baristas to have on staff during that chaotic lunch rush to maximize your profit. Okay, here's our data. Let's take a second to really understand what this table is telling us. So with one barista, they can crank out 20 coffees in an hour. At $5 a coffee, that's $100 in revenue, and their labor cost is $20 an hour. Now look closely at what happens when we add a second barista. The total output jumps to 35 coffees. Now notice, they didn't just double the output. They're working together, maybe one takes orders while the other makes drinks, so they're more efficient. We are going to use this data and our new tool, marginal analysis, to find the perfect staffing level. So here we are, our first real decision point. You've got one barista holding down the fort, it's busy, and you've got a great resume sitting on your desk. Based on the numbers we just saw, should you make that hire? Now we're not going to guess. We are going to calculate. We need to find the marginal revenue and the marginal cost of hiring that specific person. Okay, let's do the math together. What is the additional revenue we get from hiring the second barista? Well, we look at the table. Total coffees per hour went from 20 with one person up to 35 with two. So the addition, the margin, is 15 coffees. At $5 a pop, we just multiply 15 by 5, and that gives us a marginal revenue of $75. That is the extra cash that this second person is bringing into the business each hour. And the marginal cost? Well, this one's even easier. It's just the additional cost of hiring that one more person. The table tells us their hourly wage is $20, so our MC is a flat $20. So now we compare. The second barista brings in an extra $75 of revenue, and they only cost us an extra $20. Since MR at $75 is way greater than MC at $20, is this a profitable decision? You bet it is. It's a fantastic decision. The answer is an easy, emphatic yes. You hire that second barista. And if we were to run the numbers on the third barista, which you should do, you'd find that it's also a profitable hire. Okay, great work. We've hired baristas 2 and 3. Business is booming. But what about number 4? You know, the coffee shop is starting to get a little crowded behind the counter. People are bumping into each other. Does the math still work? Let's run the numbers one more time, but this time focusing only on the marginal impact of that fourth hire. And this is where things get really interesting. We are now seeing a classic economic principle in action, the law of diminishing returns. The fourth barista only adds 5 more coffees per hour to our total. So their marginal revenue is 5 coffees times $5, which is just $25. Now the marginal cost to hire them is still $20 an hour. So we ask the question again, should we hire them? Well, is $25 greater than 20? Yes, it is, so we still make the hire. But look at how much that profit margin has shrunk. This is how we zero in on the perfect spot. If we considered a fifth barista who maybe only added 3 coffees an hour, their MR would be $15, and that is less than their $20 MC. And that's our signal, our red light telling us we've gone too far. The optimal number is 4. Now, what's so beautiful about this framework is how incredibly versatile it is. It's not just for hiring decisions. Let's apply the exact same logic to a completely different but just as common business challenge, setting the perfect price for a new product to maximize your total revenue.
The process here is very methodical, very logical. First, you look at different price points, and you estimate how many units you think you'll sell at each price. That's step 1. From there, it's simple math to calculate total revenue, just price times quantity. But we don't stop there, because that's average thinking. The key, the whole game, is step 3. Calculating the marginal revenue of each price change. We're specifically asking, how much additional revenue did we get by dropping the price from $50 down to $40?
So let's really dig into this pricing table. At a high price of $50, we sell 100 units and we make $5,000. Now watch what happens. When we drop the price to $40, we sell more units, 150 of them, and our total revenue goes up to $6,000. So the marginal revenue of that specific price drop is a positive $1,000. We do it again, dropping the price to $30. Our total revenue climbs to its peak, right here at $6,600, a marginal gain of $600. But look what happens if we get greedy and drop the price again to $20. Sure, we sell more units, but our total revenue actually falls back down to $6,000. The marginal revenue of that last price drop is a negative $600. We've gone over the peak and we're heading down the other side of the mountain. So the data gives us an absolutely clear, unambiguous answer. The revenue maximizing price is $30. At that specific point, the marginal revenue of cutting the price any further becomes negative. It starts to hurt us more than it helps us. We have found the very top of the revenue mountain. Any step further in any direction takes us downhill. This is the incredible power of thinking at the margin. All right, now that we've seen marginal analysis in action in 2 different scenarios, let's pause and talk about how to use it correctly and, just as importantly, how to avoid some very common pitfalls. Because getting this right in the real world is what's going to make you a truly effective decision maker. Okay, let's be very clear about this. The single biggest mistake I see students and even experienced managers make is confusing average cost with marginal cost. Someone will look at the books and say, hey, our average cost to make a widget is $15, but we're only selling the last few for $14. We're losing money, shut down the factory. But if the marginal cost of making that very last widget, the extra materials and labor, was only $10, then selling it for $14 is still a profitable move. That extra $4 is helping to cover your fixed costs like rent. You also have to remember diminishing returns, as we saw with the baristas, and be careful to include all the true marginal costs, which might include things like extra strain on your support staff, not just the obvious direct costs. If you only take one single thing away from our entire discussion today, please let it be this idea. Marginal analysis is fundamentally a forward-looking tool. It is about the future. It frees you from the trap of sunk costs and past averages, and it requires you to evaluate every single decision based purely on its future incremental impact. This is the mindset of an effective business strategist. And that brings us right to our final thought for the day. We've spent this time using this incredible framework to optimize for profit. But what else could it be used for? What's the marginal impact of a new factory on the local environment? What is the marginal impact of a 4-day work week on employee morale and productivity? Or the marginal impact of a controversial ad on your brand's reputation? The principles are exactly the same. As you move into leadership roles, you will find that the most complex and important decisions require you to weigh not just one margin, but many. Thank you all for your attention.